You're listening to the Digital Data Café podcast, where we talk about everything data-driven in your world. Join us each week to hear from the world's top business and industry leaders on why using data in a digital world matters. Here's your host, Albert Thompson.
Thank you all. This is another episode of Digital Data Cafe. I am your host, Albert Thompson, and CEO of Driven IQ. I am pumped and excited. I have the one, the only owner and founder, the BDC Alchemist, Mr. Shawn BDC Armorer. Shawn, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, but quite the intro. Thank you so much.
You deserve it, man. I mean, listen, we met at Digital Dealer, right? And
Yep.
right then and there. I mean, right on the docks. We're like, this is it. You and I connected right off the bat, right?
Yes.
So Alchemist, man, BDC Alchemy, that's the name of the business, right? So tell our listeners out here, what's BDC Alchemy and who's Shawn Armorer?
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Well, first things first, thanks for inviting me. So BDC Alchemy, I'm the owner and founder. Been in the business now going on 21 years. So BDC Alchemy, basically I assist dealerships in architecting revenue generating BDCs. Okay, it's based heavily on people, process, and technology.
So,
Okay.
got it. I'm sorry, I didn't have to say. You basically help dealers architect their BDCs. Is that right?
Correct.
And
a lot of times what happens is their BDCs are broken or they just need a recalibration. It's not necessarily that they're no good. However, you don't know what you don't know. Right. So if we look at it under the rooftop, one of the departments that was created years and years and years ago was the BDC. Why? Because there was an absence, I guess you could say, of a proactive mindset on the sales floor. Okay, regardless of the reasons why. So a salesperson or his ex-sales manager created the BDC to fill in that void. So what had happened is over time, the dealership evolved, the people evolved, marketing evolved, the way we communicate evolved, but the BDC hasn't evolved. Typically speaking, because I come from it, I'll tell you that in a second, but typically speaking, your BDC will be found. First of all, BDC is always like this mystical department hidden somewhere in the dealership.
That's right.
Like, hey, do you guys have a BDC? Yeah, it's over down there. And usually it's like an X storage room.
Yeah,
there's a mop to my left and there's the box of work orders to my right. And then in a 10 by 10, there's like 4 people.
It's so funny. It's so funny that you said that because that is literally so true. I can't even begin to tell you how many dealerships I've been in. It's like, where's that mystical BDC room? And it's like, a little box there with 4 cubes put together, right?
That's correct. Man. And what's so funny about it is, I've become an industry authority.
Okay.
I don't like to use the word expert, a bit hubris, but I've become an industry authority on BDC. Why? Because that's where I come from.
Okay.
So just to back it up a little bit, 21 years ago, after coming out of school, I did some marketing courses, graduated in marketing. When I left school, I couldn't find work. I was on my own, so I had some bills to pay. So at the time, my little brother was working at one of the larger dealer groups here in Montreal. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, listen, I'll take anything right now. It's not who I am, it's my circumstance.
That's right.
Right. So I'm just a hard worker, lots of work ethic, and just get my foot in the door and then I'll make some noise from there. Right. So he got me in at one of these dealers washing cars. And it was only supposed to be for about 3 months. I think it was the summer of 02 or 03, something like that. But it was only supposed to be a couple months, wash a couple of cars, send out, my resume, try and get into what I originally planned to do. Yep. Lo and behold, 21 years later, here I am building BDCs literally across the world. When I say across the world is I do some consulting. I've been as far as Poland, a little bit of consulting in Germany, Trinidad and Tobago. I'm here in Canada, as well as in the States. So there's some consulting aspect of it. I do BDC service, BDC sales, but what I really pride myself on is the elite BDC coaching component aspect of my business. So that's it. So go ahead.
No, absolutely. It's funny. Your story, right? It's the typical, how did we get into auto story? That's what I was thinking about. I was like, we never meant to be here, but here we all are, right?
Yeah, and I guess what fuels my passion and my excitement for what it is that I do, because there's plenty of great BDC practitioners, there's coaches, there's consultants, there's trainers, but I guess my story is just a little different. Is it better than anybody else's? Absolutely not. It's just my story. I worry about me. I stay in my lane, right? I love to collaborate. So what happened is that when I was washing cars, when I went in, this is a big, we still laugh to this day, because the service manager that did my interview, I actually showed up in a suit and tie.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, that's how bad I wanted the job. And he was just
Good.
laughing at me. He's like, "You do realize this is to wash cars and not to sell?" I'm like, "Absolutely."
That's right.
But this is how bad I want to get in here. So once I got in, I just worked on my craft. I just focused on what I have to do today and do it as best as I possibly can. Be a better version than I was yesterday. And that work ethic, you can't fake work ethic.
No, you can't. And you know what's so funny is I love that, man. And you're getting me hyped up. So we better be careful, because two of us hyped up, man, we're in trouble.
We're going to break the internet.
No, we might physically break the internet. It might just melt LinkedIn. But I will tell you this, man, you cannot fake that hustle. You cannot fake that drive, man. You either have it or you don't. And, it's funny because you got in about 21 years. I've been in for about 25 years, started selling, my own business, believe it or not, when I was 14, 15 years old, it was,
Nice.
to franchise dealers, a photo taking service. But, one thing you just said that, really resonated with me, man, is that, you just drive that, that internal passion. And, guys like us, we run silent and we run deep.
I like that. Nice and deep, surgically deep.
There you
And
go.
and what happened is that what a lot of people don't understand, and if this could touch one person watching this right now, is my story. Look at where I started.
Yeah.
I started off washing cars. It was like an accident. It was supposed to be here for 3 months. However, I need people to understand, especially BDC practitioners, because these shoulders are for them. Stand on my shoulders, right? I'm doing this work for them. I'm doing this work for me as well. But it's more to, how can I say, I'm trying to interject the mindset, or I'm trying to interject a path of legitimacy for the BDC once and for all.
Well, let's talk about that. So your
Yes.
story. So you go in there, you're washing cars, man. You came in there, you were dressed like the president because you wanted to be the president. And there you go. Now you're 21 years into the game, and
Yes.
these shoulders are there for BDC practitioners out there to stand
Right.
on. So walk us through that. What does that look like?
That looks like very simple. Focusing on the core purpose of the BDC. The core purpose of a BDC is to drive a consistent flow of traffic to both the sales and the service departments. It should do 4 things.
Okay.
It should improve customer communication. It should allow for a consistent customer communication. It should drive customer retention and ultimately improve CSI. Yet, every single time that we talk about BDC, when we look at the metrics, when we look at the KPIs, whenever someone's talking about BDC, they're always talking about, well, how many cars are sold and how many this and how many
Right.
that. It's not. Sold is a result of the work that we do. The selling of vehicles is a byproduct of the systems that are in place. Let me just explain. I am of the firm belief that we need, in order to solve a problem, we can't solve problems at the same level of thinking that created them in the first place.
I like that. I like
So
that a
in
lot.
order to truly, not even just solve a problem, but to invoke change, we need to solve the problems at a systems level, not at the results level. We need to solve things at a systems level. The results are simply a byproduct of your systems in place.
That's right. That's right. I like the way that you've really broken this down into 4 systematic things, that are the intrinsic core for, if you will, for the BDC, right? So we're improving customer communication. We're creating consistent consumer communication. We're trying to solve for retention, and then ultimately we're trying to drive better CSI from a both sales, very ops perspective and a fixed ops perspective. But to your point, right? If the byproduct of the issue is XYZ, you can't solve it if your mindset is still of XYZ. We got to go to the systemic level and solve for that. So how does a dealership, and again, please, tell the listeners out there. So how would a retailer out there who's been doing it the same way over and over and over, how are they going to invoke that change and think from a different mindset? How would you propose they do that?
Well, the first things first is we need to understand what the actual issue is. All right. What I'm seeing in the modern climate are patterns, because obviously I deal with BDCs all over, right? So I'm just seeing patterns, and I'm not knocking on it. I love this industry. It has given me everything. It puts food on the table. It's given me a career. So by all means, this is coming from a place of love, and it's coming from a place of passion. So what I'm seeing are patterns, and these patterns is that we're trying to constantly solve short-term problems that have very long-term negative effects on potential growth. So common are these problems that they become ingrained in the business and ultimately become unrecognizable to the decision makers. Case in point, if we look at the sales side, the entire thing needs to be reverse engineered. Let me explain. We have for decades been in the industry that go from month to month to month to month. You're as good as your last month. So we go from one month to another, and we just kind of navigate and we kind of bulldoze through a month. And then the first of the next month, think about that. We just had a good month or a bad month. The first 3 days, typically speaking, there's a sales meeting based on what we did and what we didn't do, et cetera, and what are the new KPIs for this month. And then we just the same routine all over again.
That's right.
We never kind of stop and breathe and take it in and analyze the data. What is the data saying? Manage the data, coach the people. Manage the data, coach the people. So in between those the months, from month to month, we kind of just hip hop like a frog, and we're leapfrogging from month to month to month to month without focusing on the fundamental core, which is the people. Right now, we're going to bring in trainers. Not to harp on trainers, they're great. But training should come after the foundation has been poured.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Not to interrupt you. I think you're exactly right. All too often we'll come in here, we'll bring in these trainers, and we'll have them come in there and train us on, how great these new processes could be, but we haven't solved for the foundation yet. And you really can't, great training, bad foundation, you're going to go back to poor execution. So, this is a really good segue, because one of the things that you and I've talked about, and what I get really excited about with BDC Alchemy, is your business. And again, I don't want to explain it for you, but you break it down into what? People, technology, with three things: people, technology, and process.
People, technology, and process.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? So, how does that relate to the dealership? And I think you're doing some of that now, explaining it, but people, technology, and process, how does that relate to a dealership for their BDC?
Okay, cool. So the great question, by the way, right? So I call it reverse engineering. Right. So when I first get to a dealership, or when we get on the discovery call, right away it's, hey, how long is this going to take? How long are we going to see profits? And my immediate response is, how long is the thread? Like we need what am I walking into? How much damage do we have to repair, et cetera, et cetera. So when I say reverse engineering, what I mean by that is, Stephen Covey said it the best. Begin with the end in mind. Where do we want to go, and where are we right now? So by amalgamating people, technology, and process into a carefully balanced choreograph, you are able to create sustainable action and economic alchemy. Now, what I mean by that is, when we're looking at people, it's all about EQ, or emotional intelligence. We need to connect with our people on a cellular level. Manage the data and coach the people. Don't use the data to discipline the people. They're doing their job already. They're showing up. They're not late. They come every day. They spend 8, 9, 10, 11 hours, in my case, 15 hours at the dealership, right?
Right.
So they're already doing their job. It's time for us as leaders to do ours. Number 2 is technology. I love technology. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, all these new things coming up. I was just over at Digital Dealer. I was over at the NADA. So many exciting companies coming out, but we have to be very careful in how we use technology and not get too caught up and create new patterns of disruption. What I mean by that is I basically use technology to replace the repetitive binary human actions, right? What can I use AI for, or what can I use a piece of technology for to replace this binary action so that my BDC could be more focused on revenue generating activities? Right. And then last but not least, we have processes. And as I said it before, processes are systems. It's just systems. And in order to have systems, like I was talking about reverse engineering, for far too long, we've had like this hierarchy in the dealership or in any organization. I think that in order for us to get through what we're getting through, the next evolutionary step is to go from a hierarchy process to more of a network based. Have networks within your system.
Right.
And lastly, what I'm saying is to take a page out of Simon Sinek's book. He said, and I love this quote, which is why I say it so much: managers do things right, leaders do the right things.
Yes,
so now that brought into my business the perspective of maybe we don't need more managers. Maybe what we truly need are leaders.
Yeah.
So by amalgamating these thought processes and adopting more of a network system within your ranks, you no longer, or the dealer principal or the GM no longer is alone in his office trying to figure out how the hell are we going to solve this. Can you imagine going from a dealer principal with 3 managers to a dealer principal with 8 leaders?
Love it. Love it. I do. I think that's great. And, let me ask you a question, Shawn, because I think, each of these processes, right? So you got, let's look at it this way. Fundamentals is a better word, right? So you've got, you got technology, you've got people, and you got processes. Each of these can be broken down into, more subsegments. That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So there's no end to it.
That's right. So when you talk about, the emotional intelligence of the people, what's the right kind of person? If I'm a general manager, right, I'm looking at, hey, maybe I don't have a BDC, or maybe my BDC is lackluster, and I want to stand up a better performing, BDC, and I want to just try to take a rule out of your page book. How about that? What kind of, qualities would you say make the right person for a BDC role, or is that maybe not the way to look at it?
Well, when looking at BDC, it's very important to understand. I mean, there's a broad spectrum of us. There's a broad spectrum of talent out there. Some people make it faster than others. Some people look at failure to motivate them, such as myself. I don't see things as failure. I see things as learning opportunities, and to make sure, hey, I won't do that again. So when we're talking about what kind of manager or what kind of person to lead the BDC, I would have to say, take your time with it.
Yeah.
Study your craft, learn the intricacies of what you do and not just the surface level stuff. What I mean by that is oftentimes on my discovery call, my first question, because I usually like to have the current BDC manager or team leader, as well as the dealer principal or the GM in the same room. And my first question all the time is, can you please, in one sentence, define the core purpose of a BDC? And I have yet to have a clear, articulated answer. Now, I've gotten some really good answers, but failure of understanding the core purpose, which is, as I said before, to drive a continuous flow of traffic to both the sales and service. That has nothing to do with sales. The sales is a byproduct.
Right.
So now when we're talking about BDC agents, let me break it down for you real quick. And this is from me, but it's 21 years of doing this craft. I've coached hundreds of agents. A lot of my agents have went on to become service managers, service advisors, team leaders, BDC managers. So typically speaking, if there's a GM watching this right now and they're on the hunt right now to replace or what have you, 0 to 3 years is a typical BDC agent, give or take, right? So from 0 to 3 years, at 2.5, 3 years, of always doing these binary repetitive movements, they start, okay, what's next?
Right.
3 to 5 years is typically where you should have enough understanding, and that would be what I would call a team leader.
Okay.
From 5 to 8 years, you should have adopted enough of the understanding of the intricacies and the other departments and how your BDC affects other departments. So from 5 to 8 it is 0 to 3, 3 to 5. Yeah, 5 to 8 is a BDC manager. And then once you get at that 8-year mark, again, it could happen at 6, it could happen at 7, but to truly have a revenue generating BDC at 8+ years is what I like to refer to as a BDC director.
Got it. Love it. And, and then the next thing I think would be really interesting for our listeners. And of course, you're speaking to my heart when you talk about data. When you talk about data, that's my heart, man. I love managing the data. Data from either, user analytics, user experience, consumer data. Data is going to give you a wealth of knowledge as to how you can really manage your business effectively. In a BDC role, what are some of the data points that you've seen or that you've experienced that really can help a retailer become more effective? Is that managing towards appointments? Is it show ratios? Is it closing ratios? Is it all of the above?
That's the $1 million question. I'm gonna have to charge you for that one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, make sure you don't give all of it away, because at the end, they still call you, right? Yeah, that's right.
Right. So what I will give you is what the industry standards are. Okay, and these industry standards, again, this is what I've been accustomed to. Again, I've been following these for years and years and years. So the industry standards, which could kind of have changed, but as a base, we all need to start off with a base, right? So as an industry standard, your booking ratio should be anywhere between 25 to 30%, roughly. There's a lot of BDCs that are above, but there are a lot of BDCs that are under. So as a starting point, 25 to 30% booking, and then you incremental growth from there. When over on the show side, you're looking for roughly in the areas of 65% show.
Okay.
Now, of course, again, you can incremental growth and you work off that. But as a starting point for anyone watching this that had no idea, 65% show is typically what's happening out there. And when we're talking about sold, even though we don't control the sold, but this is a whole other topic, but I'll just drop it really quick. The BDC only controls the sold through calling back the unsold, getting the data, and feeding the sales manager the data.
Love that. Break it down. Daily,
break it down. So it's about 10 to 12% sold.
Got it.
So again, the BDC doesn't specifically get up and get Albert to come in and sell the car. Yep. But as a BDC manager, you want to be tracking that. If you're at 6, 7% sold, I immediately are we calling the unsolds?
Right.
Are we calling the unsolds? Yes, we are, religiously. Okay, well, did the salesperson put the notes so that when I call Albert, I can have a relevant conversation? If that is correct, then my next question is, how many times do you meet the sales manager?
Right.
I mean, I'll save you some time. If it's not every day, first thing in the morning, to go after, to look through all the appointments that came yesterday, you're already missing the mark.
Wow, that's great, man. I mean, and based on your experience, how many retailers would you say are actually really working even unsold opportunities?
I don't have that data. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. I mean, I hope they are. if you're not, start.
I agree. It's amazing sometimes to actually look internally and see where some of these things break down.
Sorry to say this, but to answer you, because it just came to me. So to answer you, it's not necessarily how many are not doing it. I am more of the why aren't they doing it?
I like that.
It's the why that's important to me. And what I have seen is a lot of times, you'll have a sales manager that tells the BDC, look, just don't touch anything. Once the customer leaves, my people will do the follow-up.
That's right.
Don't worry about that. Okay.
That's one of the reasons why I was asking, right? That's why I was asking, because you'll see that often, right? It's like, hey, once that customer...
Very, very common. Very, very common. But then again, when that happens, it's not to be cynical about it. I then go to the sales manager and I ask him, what is the precipice, or what is the origin of this mindset that you have? Why wouldn't we work on the phone all day? We're not going to miss a call. We're not going to miss an email. We're not going to miss a text. Why? Because we're sitting down here doing our activities all day. So why would you want it to touch that? And that's really when you identify. That's one of the powers of BDC Alchemy. It's not necessarily that I just go in and I'm the best thing since sliced bread, but it's my ability to work hand in hand with the multiple different departments to find out what combustion points exist. And I factor that into my daily coaching with the BDC manager, and I try and create an alignment between the two departments.
Got it. Well, I think this is a really good opportunity to segue to, well, we talked about industry average, right? So we know
Correct.
20 to 25% industry average is a good show rate. I mean, it's a good
25 to
booking
30.
rate. And then
25 to 30.
25 to 30 is okay. 25 to 30 is okay. That's a good book rate. Then 65% on average, good show rate. And
Correct.
then, you know, on average, 10 to 12% your closing ratio. What's a Shawn BDC Alchemy rate? What does that look like? I'm sure you got that data.
That I do have, because I've been quite a mad scientist, and
All right.
what happens is for me, a relationship brews. Seldomly am I do I partner up, or seldomly does my work require me to be in and out within a month.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I could do some consulting. I'll get on the phone with the vendors because I know the real questions to ask, like, is the XML ADF, is it all connected? What are the phone systems? Where are they going? I've set up a lot of phone systems and whatnot. So essentially, when I'm done, I don't find that I am successful or the project was a success. Granted, there's a lot of other components, but what I have absolutely done on my side before going out and starting my business, because I was probably pretty important to say that I was under the rooftop for 18 years before going off and starting my own business, right? Yep. And I've built here in Montreal 6 BDCs for Canada's largest dealer groups. And I'm about at 5 right now in the States. And I've consulted with BDCs in Poland and in Germany as well. So what I've seen, what I have done is that I would not be happy if the booking should be at 40%.
Okay.
My show ratio, I can't accept anything under 80. 85 is the target, but I can't accept anything under 80%, right? I take it personally. And then when we're talking about sold, 15+%, hands down, absolutely. Got it. Provided, of course, there are a lot of different elements, like we both enjoy data, provided that the contact ratio is above 35%. Like there's a lot of elements that kind of can tip the cup left or right, which is why I called my company BDC Alchemy. Because it's an ongoing process of disrupting my current belief system. I don't call my office the office. Right. I call my office the lab. Because I am constantly, with my white coat and my goggles, I am constantly in the lab trying new things. And it's so interesting because every BDC build is completely different. The ecosystems are completely different. The people are completely different. So I'm driven by these challenges. Yep. It's not just this rinse, wash, repeat, or, you know, I just come with this framework and put it over, right? It's all dependent on what's happening currently inside of your store.
You know, that's one of the things that impresses me about you the most. And I really love what you're doing, because to your point, right? Every BDC and every single retailer, depending on the OEM, depending on the ecosystem, depending on the consumer landscape, the environment, the population, the demography. And this is why you and I, you know, can work so well together when it comes to that consumer data, because to your point, it is not a rinse, wash, and repeat at every BDC, right? It is a complete custom, like you said, mad scientist, you know, build.
Absolutely. And what happens is, yes, it does take a little bit more time. 100%, it's chess, not checkers. Right? So if you're looking for instant gratification, you want to turn your BDC around in 2 months, I'll do my best, right? But what I'm talking about is longevity. What I'm talking about is people development. What I'm talking about is career opportunity. What I'm talking about is using your BDC potentially as an incubator. Like these new service advisors coming in. What does our onboard process look like? Right. Fun fact, well, not so fun, but right now in our industry, The national turnover average in the States is 20%. Not bad.
Right.
Cox Automotive did a study, and the turnover ratio in our industry is 46%.
Really? Interesting.
46%. Real stats. And when we're looking at the sales floor within that 46%, because my data has data, so
Right.
within that 46%, 80% turnover on the sales floor.
Gotcha.
So what happens is once every 2 years, your entire sales floor is almost brand new.
Yep.
Which is why we need to focus on process and not results, because that number is atrocious. If we focus on processes and we tie that into our onboarding processes, our training processes, I mean, what have we seen? Salesperson will come in, they'll start on day one, they're given a phone, they're given their desk, maybe a small 10, 15, 20-minute intro on the company, and all right, go for it.
Yep, off to the races, right.
They should spend at least 2 to 3 days in the BDC. Take some of those sales calls, take some of those leads, see how they're ingrained in the process. Use the BDC as an incubator, not necessarily as to replace people, but the onboarding process should absolutely involve the BDC.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's funny how much overlap there is in terms of that same concept when it comes to, really building, data into a dealership's, process, right? It's not just hey, within 30 days, I'm going to, embed a first party data solution and all of a sudden, problem solved. It's a complete, comprehensive process, how you're managing that, it's just to your point and shocking, right? I mean, you're talking about you're completely turning over your internal sales force probably once every year and a half at this point. So if you're not investing in that process at your retailer or your dealership, then all this work that you're doing is basically constantly just you're chasing it, right?
Well, yeah, it's like carrot and stick, right? So we listen. We have great results. We have great marketing initiatives. But what I've seen time and time again, especially from working with some of the biggest dealer groups in Canada, I was with the biggest Mercedes-Benz dealership for a little over 3 years, right? You learn a lot. I was with Toyota. I was with Mazda.
Right.
So what happens is that you start to see patterns and you start to see commonality. So instead of, walking around with a chip on my shoulder or just being irate about it, when I started my business, I already know what I want to do. I already know the importance of interdepartmental communication.
Yeah,
in any organization. Communication is always the last one because we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. It always has to be somebody's fault. It always has to be, oh, it's not me, it's him. Like instead of working collectively, instead of galvanizing the process around people and taking care of them, bringing in that churn or that turnover ratio, let's get that down to a much more respectable 20, 25% because it's inevitable. But if we bring that down to 20, 25%, now all of a sudden what we're talking about is people that are career oriented.
Absolutely. So Shawn, let me ask you a question. Just so the listeners that are out there, if you had to give just, two pieces of, maybe one or two pieces of like, hey, this is one of the biggest, catastrophic failures I'm seeing, or one of the best pieces of advice that I could give any dealership before we kind of wrap this up here, what would that be? What would you say? Something that comes directly from you that you used to say, hey, look, based on my 20 years experience, I've seen this without fail, and it's probably likely happening in your store. And here's what you should be looking at. What would that be?
Taking care of your people. Okay. Taking care of your people. I said it before and I'll say it again. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about taking care of your people. Like I said before, managers do things right. Leaders do the right thing. So when you make it about people, focus on the inputs, process, and the outputs, results will take care of themselves.
Love that. Love it.
So instead of two, I'll give you one.
That's
focus on the inputs, the outputs will take care of themselves.
But
and this is very important, Albert. I mean, genuinely focus on the inputs, not just say, hey, Albert, how you doing today? Well, I'm not so good. Okay, great. Well, I hope you have a better day. And then they walk off.
Right. Yep.
That person is yelling and screaming to be heard, to be felt, to be recognized.
That's right.
Take this person aside. We're human beings,
That's right.
right? We were biologically designed to work in packs. Yet, we have all these cylinders in the dealership. Whereas, like one of the worst things in the world is, one of the worst things in our industry is the handoff between sales and service.
Mm-hmm.
That gap that's your revenue gap.
Right.
Sales creates customers and service keeps them.
That's right.
So how are we not working together?
Absolutely. Well, and on that note, if I'm a retailer out there and I want this in my dealership and I want to build this, relationship with my people, and I want to take advantage of a BDC and I want to get better fixed ops, better sales, and I need something like this. How does one go about getting a hold of you, except, other than scanning the QR code up here? Besides scanning the QR code, if I'm just listening, how do I get a hold of Shawn?
A couple of different ways. Number one, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll answer you almost right away. Well, whenever I can, in between consulting. Visit my website. There's a ton of information on my methodology and how things work. Do that first. Get to know me a little bit, because some people, it's not their cup of tea.
Sure.
Right. But if you are genuinely into the development of your people and real revenue, sustainable revenue, bdcalchemy.com. And then my email is thebdcalchemist@gmail.com.
So bdcalchemy.com and
bdcalchemy.com and thebdcalchemist@gmail.com.
Perfect. Shawn, I appreciate you so much. As always, man, you are killing it. You're killing it. You're killing it. And pulling it up. So keep it going, man.
Thank you so much, Albert.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.